Hello and welcome to the DarkWolf's Den Show. If you would, please rise or at least put your hand over your heart for the playing of the national anthem.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Unlocked and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner, is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays.
Come on, y'all. I want to see it in the chat. Let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon. FJB. Let's go, Brandon. And an FYT. Even a honk honk. Let's see it over there in the chat.
When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner, is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion.
That's right, Brandon lives in the wonderland of delusion, right? Brandon lives in a wonderland of delusion.
Is this real?
I see you, Arrow.
Or just illusion?
Sandy B, Terry T.
Manifestation or a dark delusion?
Go Kart, I see you.
Is this real? Or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Let's go, Brandon. I got you, Deborah. For sure, for sure. It's Thursday night. Let's go, Brandon. Let's be free. FJB. FYT.
Rippin' Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests, are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Rippin' Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
Coming to you from a secret cave, hidden deep within the wilderness. This is the Darkwolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and we are broadcasting live from a secret cave hidden deep within the wilderness of Tennessee. That's right. We're ripping through the electromagnetic soup. We're tearing through the atmosphere. And we're tunneling away into your radio like a quantum particle. This is the Darkwolf's Den Radio Show for Thursday, February the 17th, 2022. So whether you're on the edge of a reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are carrying on our Freedom Flame series with a discussion on ethics. Are you an ethical person? Are you a moral person? Do you believe that everything is right or wrong, black and white, or is perhaps there some gray areas to life? We're going to dive deep down the rabbit hole that is ethics here in just a moment, but first, let's see who all we have over here in our chat rooms on YouTube, both on the Darkwolf's Den Show YouTube channel as well as the Rippin' Rabbit Hole YouTube channel. How we doing over here tonight, folks? As I said, I see JoJo's over here. Great to see you, JoJo's, and Deborah O'Connor in the Darkwolf's Den Show chat. Honk, honk, honk. I forgot my brain in Delaware. It says Michael Fontaine. Glad to see you, Michael. Over here in the Rippin' Rabbit Hole chat room, JoJo's also waving in. First in the chat in both chat rooms. Way to go, JoJo. Sandy B checking in with the US, yes, ma'am, USA all the way. Errol Taylor says hi, JoJo's, Jerry, and AJ. Great to see you, Errol. Raider Champion dropping the link in there for the great theme song, opening song we have by Miss Chick, Mandela Effect, and Michael Musco on the background beats. So check that out for sure. Terry Taggart, glad to see you over there. Everybody dropping the let's go. Brandon loving it, guys. Go Kart Bob, glad to see you, my friend. Maggie's Ace in the house. I know Maggie's is particularly looking forward to this episode. Our buddy X-Gen checking in. Glad to see you, X-Gen. X-Gen says, how? Hey, X-Gen, glad to see you howling in there, my friend. I hope life is treating you well as everybody listening, both live right now, of course, and later on. AJ the Rippin' Rabbit says YouTube kills me, the broadcast about 5 minutes in. If you guys have issues with the broadcast suddenly cutting off, do make sure that you hit the refresh button. Okay, Deborah O'Connor had to jump over here also. Yeah, do make sure you hit the refresh button. I don't know why. It's another one of those dirty little YouTube tricks they like to pull. Deranged Lunatic, great to see you again also, my friend. A lot of fun folks here, a lot of our usual crew. Glad to see everybody along for the ride. I've got a quick announcement to make. Raul 9K, glad to see you, buddy. He says howdy Wolf, howdy Raul. Quick announcement, folks. Starting Monday, I was talking to AJ a little earlier. We will be doing a major overhaul of our site. We're at the rippinrabbithole.com, as you guys know. If you go on there in the next week after starting Monday and you start experiencing issues or the site looks different, don't worry, it's not a Mandela effect and we haven't been hacked. It is us actually working on upgrading and bringing you a lot of new features and revamping and overhauling the entire site, making it much, much better for everybody who is able to use the rippinrabbithole.com. We will keep you informed as it goes on, and AJ will be giving you more information as we continue this week. Once again, glad to see all of you guys checking in tonight. XGen, I know, was dealing with a lot of ethical questions a couple weeks ago, and I do hope that worked out the best for you, sir, and we're going to be discussing a lot of interesting ethical things tonight. And whether you are joining us in our YouTube chat rooms or around the world on Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network, the rippinrabbithole.com, or on the replay on the Rippin' Rabbit Hole, BitChute, or Rumble, or even Odyssey, we appreciate having every last one of you guys along for the ride. And we'll dive down the rabbit hole that is ethics here in just a moment. But we do have two more fun little segments to do, the first of which we call Today in History. On this day in 1801, the U.S. House of Representatives breaks the Electoral College tie between Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr by finally selecting Thomas Jefferson as the president. And that happened on this day in 1801. And that is today's segment of Today in History.
Say what?
Our quote of the day today, folks, comes from Nelson Mandela. A lot of wise words have come from this man, including the following quote: "When a man is denied the right to live the life he believes in, he has no choice but to become an outlaw," end quote. And I could not agree more, as we seeing happening more and more across the world, especially in places like Canada, where the men and women just want to live the life they believe in, but have been forced into a position to fight for that life. Anyways, folks, that quote came from Nelson Mandela, and that is today's segment of
Say what?
And a definite honk shout out to the truckers across the world who are standing up for what they believe is morally and ethically right for both themselves and the rest of their countrymen. But that is not an easy decision to make. Who is to decide what is right or wrong, whether you are ethically a good person or not? Is that a black and white yes or no question? Or are there a lot of gray areas in life where you might not be being immoral or being unethical, but you may be doing something that is considered immoral, for instance? This is going to be a deep rabbit hole, folks, and we're going to get through it together.
Is it wrong to steal to feed your family? Is there such a thing as a good lie? Questions like these are the domain of ethics, the branch of philosophy that studies morality, or right and wrong behavior.
So I really love that first question there. Is it wrong to steal? Well, I think we would all agree that it's wrong to steal. But is it wrong to steal to feed your family? Think about the musical Les Miserables, right? Where Jean Valjean stole the pie to feed his starving kids, and Javier chased him to the ends of the earth. But should he have chased him to the ends of the earth? Was it wrong what he did to steal, even though he was feeding his family?
But before we can parse questions like these, we need to go deeper into metaethics, which studies the very foundations of morality itself. Metaethics asks questions as basic as, what is morality?
What is morality? Are you a moral person? Do you consider yourself that has a moral standard that is high. I consider myself a person with a moral compass that points pretty well north at all times, but does that mean that I'm right? How do I define morals and morally correctness?
What's its nature? Like, is it an objective thing out there in the world waiting to be known? Or is it more like a preference, an opinion, or just a bunch of cultural convention?
Culturally speaking, is it right to judge the morals of one culture against the morals of another? Is it right to decide, because we live in America and we believe in freedom, that we should judge places like, say, China or those who have dictatorships because that's not what we believe? Is it morally right to judge them on our standard? Just like, is it morally right to judge the past on the standards of the present? Things were a lot different. Situations were a lot different in the past than they are today. So would it be right to judge the past situations by today's standards?
There are a lot of different meta-ethical views out there, and one way to understand them is to put them to a test to see how they'd help you solve some thorny ethical problem.
Let's dive into one of those ethical problems right now.
On the one hand, when we talk about ethics, it might seem like we're talking about something fairly easy. Don't kill someone. It seems quite straightforward, and very few people would argue with that.
I think on a base level, we should all agree that we should not kill each other. I think that's a pretty well-established norm in our society.
Until you actually start to think about it. I mean, not killing someone sounds great, but of course we might think it's acceptable to kill people in certain circumstances.
I mentioned a moment ago that I like to consider myself an incredibly moral person. With that said, I know a number of elites that I would not mind seeing fall by the wayside.
For example, in self-defense. So we might come up with a different category of killing that we find particularly wrong. Say, murder. Of course, then we have to ask what it means to murder someone. What is the definition of murder? So someone might say, well, murder is a form of unjustified killing. And of course, you can see where this is going. How do we decide what is a justified versus what is an unjustified killing?
We just had a fine example of this recently in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, where we had a gentleman who killed some people in self-defense opposed to just killing someone for the sake of killing someone, right? That would be morally wrong, opposed to defending yourself being morally right, ethically correct, right?
So we might begin to say, we ought not to kill anybody who is innocent. And this sounds perfectly good, except it may be justified in certain circumstances. For example, imagine someone has been drugged against their will, and because they have been drugged, they start acting wildly and erratically, and they start attacking people. And at this point, they start coming for you or your loved ones. Now, at this point, you might feel justified or even obligated to defend yourself or your loved ones. But on the other hand, the person who is attacking you is innocent. He didn't choose to take the drugs, and in some sense, the drugs are forcing him to attack you. So he's not really guilty of doing anything wrong here, but it still might be justified to kill him.
But even though it's justified, would it be morally and ethically correct? Definitely a conundrum, and those are the kind of conundrums that plague the study of ethics, right? How about if you intend to do bad and accidentally do good? Is that right or is that wrong?
Or what about this? What if you set out to harm someone, but you ended up saving their life by accident? Some people think that ethics is a kind of science, that it seeks to discover moral truths whose existence is testable and provable. But others believe the nature of morality is every bit as subjective as whether you prefer plain M&Ms or peanut. There's just no right answer, unless you have a peanut allergy.
Having a peanut allergy would definitely make that decision a little easier, right?
So you and a friend might totally agree on whether something is immoral or not, but you might disagree fervently about why. For an example of a slippery moral scenario, let's just head straight over to the thought bubble for some flash philosophy. A burglar plots to break into an old woman's house on a Sunday morning, a time when he knows she's always at church. So one Sunday, he creeps up to her back window and smashes it with a hammer. But after he looks inside, he sees the old woman isn't at church. She's in there, laying face down on the floor. The sight of her body scares the burglar and he runs away. He was down for a little bit of burglary, but getting nabbed for murder was not part of his plan.
And I think even if some some of us would be brave enough to break said window, we would probably do the same thing and run for the hills if we seen what we thought was a dead body there. So far I think we can all agree that the burglar was wrong for trying to break into the house, right?
But what the burglar didn't know was that the woman wasn't dead. She was unconscious, having passed out because of a carbon monoxide leak that would have killed her. When the burglar broke the window, he let out some of the toxic gas and let in fresh air, which allowed her to regain consciousness. So the burglar broke into the house with the intention of stealing from the woman, but inadvertently, he saved her life.
So was the burglar right or was the burglar wrong, good or bad? He had bad intent, but he did something good. It raises a lot of moral questions, right?
Did the burglar do a good thing? Does he deserve praise even though he didn't intend to help the woman? Likewise, does he still deserve blame even though he didn't actually get around to stealing anything and ended up saving the woman's life? Thanks, Thought Bubble. Your answers to these questions will help you suss out where your moral sensibilities lie. And why you answer the way you do will say a lot about what meta-ethical view you subscribe to.
What do you guys think out there in chat? I would love to know your answers. Go ahead, put a 1 if you think that the burglar is actually innocent and is a hero for saving the woman's life. Go ahead, put a 2 if you think he should still be punished because he had the intent to steal from the place is the reason that he broke the window. Or put a 3 in the chat room if you are undecided on how this should have played out. And it's questions like these that we are faced with every single day. What is right? What is the intent is important? What is right? What is wrong? Should we make our decisions based on moral values? Should we make our decisions just based on spontaneous ideas, right? What is our moral compass and guidance in these situations? If we had to be the judge, for instance, in this case, how would we decide this case to be? Would the criminal be innocent because he saved a person's life, accidentally nonetheless? Or would he be absolutely guilty because he intended to do something bad originally? Let's see what you guys are saying over here in the chat. And it looks like we have an interesting conversation going over here in chat. I'm loving this. A lot of back and forth on what would have been the proper way. One person says Jesus was in that. Only God would know. That's interesting. So, Raider Champion 4, breaking and entering. Ral takes the Fifth Amendment. He pleads the Fifth or drinks the Fifth. Haven't figured out which one yet. Tough one, says Sandy B. Want to say 2, okay. Ral with the 3. Terry Taggart also with the 3. So, you, Sandy, believe that he should still be punished. I believe that was 2, if I'm not mistaken. I can't even remember what I said. Sounds like Minority Report 2, says Raider Champion. It's interesting. Guilty, says Deranged Lunatic. 3.4 says Earth Daughter. Very unsure about that. I don't know. I think the good deed would cancel out the bad deed, but then again, once again, you have this question of intent. You know what I mean? Is the intent count? And as I seen Maggie say earlier, basically saying who is to define good, is good objectively or subjectively defined. Deranged Lunatic with the 2 thinks the criminal should have been punished just the same. Interesting play out here in the chat, guys. Another very important question is whether or not morals are a black and white yes or no thing, or if they have a lot of gray area involved.
One of the most widely held meta-ethical views is known as moral realism, the belief that there are moral facts in the same way that there are scientific facts. In this view, any moral proposition can only be true or false. And for a lot of us, our gut intuition tells us that there are moral facts. Some things are just wrong and others are indisputably right. Like, a lot of people think that gratuitous violence is always wrong and nurturing children is always right, no matter what.
And that is actually what forms part of the basis of natural law. this concept that we naturally know right and wrong.
But you don't have to dig very deep into moral realism before you run into trouble. Like, for one thing, if there are moral facts, where do they come from? How do we know what they are? Are they testable, like scientific facts are? Are they falsifiable? And if morality is based on facts, then why is there so much disagreement about what's moral and what's not, as opposed to science, where there's often more consensus? This is what's known as the grounding problem. The grounding problem of ethics is the search for a foundation for our moral beliefs, something solid that would make them true in a way that is clear, objective, and unmoving.
For instance, the Bible gives a very specific code and standard of morals and ethics to stand on. A lot of people believe that their religion is what stops them from doing wrong because they know that the God they serve will punish them, right?
If you can't find a way to ground morality, you might be pushed toward another meta-ethical view, moral anti-realism. This is the belief that moral propositions don't refer to objective features of the world at all, that there are no moral facts. So a moral anti-realist would argue that there's nothing about gratuitous violence that's inherently wrong. Likewise, they'd say, if you look at the rest of the animal kingdom, sometimes nurturing your kids doesn't seem like it's that important. So maybe morality isn't the same for everyone. But still, most people you know, including yourself probably, are committed to some form of moral realism. And there are many forms. So let's familiarize ourselves with some of its most popular flavors. Some moral realists are moral absolutists. Not only do they believe in moral facts, they believe that there are some moral facts that don't change. So for them, if something is wrong, it's wrong regardless of culture or circumstance. Moral facts apply as universally and as constantly as gravity or the speed of light.
For instance, a large group of the population believe that freedom is the right way to live in any country regardless of any other circumstance. Whereas you have countries like China and North Korea who really believe in these, and Canada now, who believe in these strong dictatorships that we believe is morally wrong. That is a morally absolute truth to me. I believe everybody should be free.
If moral absolutism sounds too rigid, maybe moral relativism would appeal to you. This view says that more than one moral position on a given topic can be correct. And one of the most common forms of moral relativism is cultural relativism.
And again, like I mentioned earlier, and like I just mentioned a moment ago, I don't believe that the dictatorship type governments are a good thing. However, that is a cultural belief because I was raised in a culture of freedom, whereas those raised under the dictatorship were raised in that culture. So is it morally correct and ethically correct for me to judge that culture by my own belief systems, right?
But there are actually two different things a person might mean when they talk about cultural relativism. The more general kind is descriptive cultural relativism. This is simply the belief that people's moral beliefs differ from culture to culture. No one disputes that. It seems obviously true. Like, some cultures believe that capital punishment is morally right, and other cultures believe it is morally wrong, that killing another human is inherently unethical. But there's also normative cultural relativism, which says that it's not our beliefs, but moral facts themselves that differ from culture to culture. So in this view, capital punishment is morally correct in some cultures and morally wrong in others. Here, it's the moral fact of the matter that differs based on.
Now, when we speak of culture, we don't necessarily have to be speaking of, say, again, China or another culture of that type. Look at America. You've got the culture of Democrats and the culture of Republicans. You've also got the culture of independents and many other parties. But the point here is the fact that the difference between these cultures are really based on their moral stance on a lot of topics, their ethical stance on things. For instance, the death penalty, as he mentioned here, or the stance on abortion between one political party and the other, or in this case, the stance on an experiment and whether or not to be part of an experiment between one party or the other, politically speaking. We see a difference in what we believe to be freedom and socialism between the two parties, right? It could be culturally different within the same country. It doesn't necessarily have to be two overall culture differentials, like Muslim and American or Chinese and American, whatever the case may be.
Culture. Now, normative cultural relativism might sound pretty good to you. It does at first to a lot of people, because it seems like it's all about inclusiveness and tolerance. Who am I to tell other cultures how they should live, right? But this view actually has some pretty big flaws. If every culture is the sole arbiter of what's right for it, that means no culture can actually be wrong. It means Nazi culture actually was right for the people living in that culture. A dissenting German voice in, say, 1940 would have just been wrong if it had claimed that Jewish people deserve to be treated the same as other Germans. And what makes things even weirder is that if normative cultural relativism is true, then the concept of moral progress doesn't make sense either. If what everyone is doing right now is right relative to their own culture, then there's never any reason to change it.
Which would lead to stagnation and no growth in the society, both morally and ethically speaking.
Problems like these make some people take a second look at the anti-realist stance, which, remember, is the view that there just aren't any moral facts. Just one flavor of moral anti-realism is moral subjectivism. This view says that moral statements can be true and false, right or wrong, but they refer only to people's attitudes rather than their actions. By this thinking, capital punishment is neither right nor wrong, but people definitely have preferences about it, and those preferences key into personal attitudes, but not into actual objective moral facts about the world. Like, some people favor capital punishment and think it's just, others oppose it and think it's unjust. But it doesn't go any deeper than that. There are no moral facts, only moral attitudes. There are other varieties of both moral realism and anti-realism, but this should give you an idea of the general meta-ethical lay of the land. And by now it probably seems like I've given you a lot more problems than solutions. So let's talk about the moral frameworks you'll use to navigate your way through all of these moral mazes. These frameworks are known as ethical theories. They're moral foundations that help you come up with consistent answers about right and wrong conduct. All ethical theories have some kind of starting assumptions, which shouldn't be surprising because really all of our beliefs rest on some basic assumed beliefs. For instance, natural law.
And of course, if you guys don't know, we have checked out and studied natural law in the Freedom Flame series, so go back and check out that episode for more information on natural law.
Relies on the starting assumption that God created the universe according to a well-ordered plan, while another ethical theory known as utilitarianism relies on the starting assumption that all beings share a common desire to seek pleasure and avoid pain. The starting assumptions of a theory can lead us to other beliefs, but if you reject those initial assumptions, the rest of the theory just doesn't follow. Now, in addition to starting assumptions, ethical theories also consist of moral principles, which are the building blocks that make up the theories, and these principles can be shared between more than one theory. For instance, many ethical theories agree on the principle that it's just wrong to cause unjustified suffering. Some ethical theories hold the principle that any unjustified killing is wrong, and that includes animals, while other theories hold the principle that it's only wrong to unjustifiably kill humans. But the thing about ethical theories is that most people don't identify with just one. Instead, most people identify with principles from several theories that help them form their moral views.
So, do you still consider yourself an incredibly moral person after we have reviewed this information in the first half over morality and ethics? Would you consider things black and white, or are there a lot of gray areas in the world? There's so many different dilemmas and different decisions we make every single day, but do we make those decisions based upon our moral fortitude and our ethical fortitude on what we truly believe is right or wrong, or do we make them based on social norms, right? Where do the societal social norms lie when it comes to ethics and morality? Is one group of people more moral than the other in society, or is everybody equal? Are you better off if you did or did not be part of an experiment? Are you morally substandard if you didn't? There's so many ethical questions to what's going on in today's world, and we're going to cover even more of these ethical questions in the second half. But as you guys know, that music means we have to go ahead and take a network break. So my name's Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and you're listening to the DarkWolf's Den Radio Show exclusively on Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network, the rippinrabbithole.com. Sit back, relax, and we'll be right back. Don't you touch that dial. That's right.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Oh yeah, Jerry Hicks and the Darkwolf's Den Radio Show on a Thursday night. The Freedom Flame series continues. Are you enjoying tonight's look at ethics? I know I am. If you are, and you haven't done so already, please make sure to put your thumb up in the air. And if you're listening to us on YouTube, you can feel free to use a finger and tell them what you really think about their community standards, guidelines, and censorship. There simply isn't any room for censorship under the guise of the Freedom Flame, where the Freedom Flame burns for each and every one of our freedoms, regardless of our beliefs, our trusted sources, or even our values. Did you know that Jerry Hicks has started a new morning series that airs about 5 a.m. every morning? It's called Censored Freedom. Now, if you're not up at 5 a.m., you can catch it down the rabbit hole as he's been posting them, as well as we're working on getting him introduced into the community-generated press so that he can post those regularly on demand, as the podcast is a half-hour broadcast, and you can listen to it live exclusively at ripinrabbithole.com. That's RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. While you're there, make sure to sign up for your exclusive Backstage Pass. It's going to give you unfiltered access down the rabbit hole to where the conversation continues after the show. Speaking of shows, I'll be back again tomorrow night for Friday Night Live, the Rip and Rabbit Hole Show. Joshua Glover will be my topic. Join me tomorrow night, Friday, February 18th, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, and we'll dive through an 1854 tale of the escaped fugitive slave, Joshua Glover. I think you're going to enjoy it. And then Saturday night, we're going to spend a full evening, Saturday, February 19th, looking at angel numbers, you know, like when the clock is 444 or 222 or 1111 or 111. Some people refer to that as angel numbers. We're going to dive deep down the rabbit hole and explore that together Saturday, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, as all shows do. And then we'll end the weekend out right together with a special guest. Bella is going to be here, and we're going to dive through the fascinating rabbit hole and tale of heaven, the Janie Lane story. There's a lot of really wild coincidences. We're going to tackle it and end out the weekend right together with you. Sunday, February 20th. We'll return back to tonight's topic of ethics with your host, Jerry Hicks, and the Darkwolf's Den Show. You're listening to the Ripin' Common Sense Radio Network, ripinrabbithole.com.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Darkwolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to the second half of the Darkwolf's Den Radio Show for Thursday, February the 17th, 2022. So whether you're on the edge of a reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. If you're just joining us, in the first half, we went over a variety of different definitions and information about morals and ethics and how they are so very important in our world. And in the second half, we're going to discuss moral dilemmas, right? So I was faced personally with a moral dilemma. What was it, last year? Yes, last year. The guidance that was given down from some of these upper agencies was to suggest that one had to put something on if they were not a part of an experiment, whereas others did not have to put something on if they were a part of an experiment. And I do not like discrimination. It is something that is morally reprehensive in my book. But I found myself being discriminated against because I had refused to be part of an experiment. Therefore, I was being punished for not wearing said device, where others were not being punished for committing the same action. And I had a decision to make. Do I stand on my morals and what I know to be wrong and stand up for myself and put everything I have at risk, do the best job as far as pay-wise that I've ever had, the most perfect setup one could ask for? I literally had it made. Do I give up my entire life as I know it at the time on my moral stance? Or do I just go along to get along, swallow my pride, swallow my morals, and just keep on making the money for survival's sake? And of course, for those that don't know, I chose to stand up for myself. My morals just would not let me put up with it anymore, so I told my boss at the time how I felt about the situation, and that I refused to be discriminated against any further, at which point the outcome that I kind of expected already occurred, and I was fired. I put the option on the line, put everything I had on the line for what I believed to be morally right, and I paid a physical price for it. But was I right or wrong? Some would say I was absolutely right for standing up for what I believe in, for my moral fortitude, right? My ethical fortitude. Others would say, and I actually had this said to me, that I was merely being selfish and wasn't thinking of the greater good of the company. I personally don't regret what I did. I stand on my decision, on my moral compass, because I'm a person that is led by my moral compass, my ethics. I stand on everything I do based on my morals. But we also learned in the first half that's not always so black and white, is it? There's a lot of gray areas, and there's a lot of things that go into consideration when it comes to making these moral decisions about our lives. And we're going to dive into a couple different moral dilemmas.
When dilemmas involve human actions which have moral implications, they are called ethical or moral dilemmas. Moral dilemmas, therefore, are situations where persons, who are called moral agents in ethics, are forced to choose between two or more conflicting options, but neither of which resolves the situation in a morally acceptable manner.
Back to the example I just gave in my own life there, neither one of those would have been morally acceptable to all parties. So for myself, it was morally acceptable to do what I believe in and stand up for what I saw as discrimination against me. However, on the company's side, it was not morally acceptable. I should have just followed the rules, and I was being selfish to want to think that I had any kind of rights. So you've got these moral dilemmas here, and what the outcome would be. Some would say that I would have been, like I mentioned a moment ago, wrong for leaving that company because they've given me so much over the years. In return, I should have just went along to get along, right? So it really is no positive outcome. There is just our perspective of the situation, whether or not we personally did a moral or immoral or unjust, unethical act, right?
Let's consider this scenario as an example. Lindsay is a deeply religious person, hence she considers killing humans absolutely wrong. Unfortunately, it is found out that Lindsay is having an ectopic pregnancy. As is well known, an ectopic pregnancy is a type of pregnancy that occurs outside the uterus, most commonly in the fallopian tubes. In other words, in ectopic pregnancy, the fetus does not develop in the uterus. Now, if this happens, the development of the fetus will definitely endanger the mother. Thus, if Lindsay continues with her pregnancy, then there is a big possibility that she will die.
And this is a more common than not scenario, and it puts the person in what would be considered between a rock and a hard place. At what point do I stand on my morals, and am I willing to die for my belief, right? That really brings into question a lot of these morality concepts.
According to experts, the best way to save Lindsay's life is to abort the fetus, which necessarily implies killing the fetus. If we do not abort the fetus, then Lindsay, as well as the fetus, will die. In this example of a moral dilemma, Lindsay is faced with two conflicting options. Namely, either she resorts to abortion, which will save her life, but at the same time jeopardizes her moral integrity, or does not resort to abortion but endangers her life as well as the fetus. Indeed, Lindsay is faced with a huge moral dilemma.
And in my opinion, there is no right or wrong answer to this, right? It comes down to the personal choice. Now, will others in society judge the choices we make? Absolutely they will. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those choices were wrong. In this example, you have the difference between death or the death of a fetus. So again, neither one of these a good choice to make, but a choice that has to be made just the same. And I do apologize for the little bit of noise behind me as we have a little bit of activity with my grandsons running around and getting ready for bed.
A trolley out of control. A streetcar is out of control and speeding towards a group of 7 people. Okay, sounds familiar. Being on an overhead footbridge, you're not in danger. You see a big bulky guy standing next to you, and you realize that if you push the man onto the track below the footbridge, it'll stop the trolley. However, the man will surely die. On the other hand, you'll save 7 innocent people. Would you sacrifice 1 life for 7?
This is a lot like the famous train dilemma. Would or could you sacrifice someone's life to save other people's? Like more than one. Like in this example, sacrificing 1 person to save 7. Could you do it?
A. I'd do it without hesitation. B. I just couldn't take a life, even if it meant saving 7 other people.
What do you guys think? A. Would you be able to do it? B. Would you not? Go ahead and put in the chat room now. A or B. Which one are you? Would you be able to sacrifice a person if you knew it would save many others? This goes back and reminds me of the Star Trek episodes I used to watch all the time. One of the underlying themes of that is for the greater good. And we hear this a lot nowadays, for the greater good. It's been a little overpressed in the media, if you ask me, but in this scenario, it would be for the greater good of more people than the one. So would you sacrifice the one to save the many? Definitely a major moral dilemma. Let's see what you guys have said over here in the chat. Looks like we've got Raider Champion over here with the B. I think you could only make that call if the life was your own. So could not take a life. Go-Kart Bob, B. Could only not make that choice. Could not sacrifice another human for the greater good. It's definitely a moral dilemma for sure. One that I would really hate to be stuck in, because I really don't know where I stand on this. Could you sacrifice somebody you don't know, mind you, to save a group of people? Or would you let the more larger number of people die because you can't sacrifice a life? These are things that generals in war, of course, have to deal with all the time. And with the current status of reality, it's questions that we are going to end up asking ourselves more and more often. Maybe not to this degree, but to the degree of, what sacrifices am I willing to make? Am I willing to sacrifice my morals, or, find myself in these dilemmas? What choices am I really willing to make if it comes down to it? Sandy B with the B says, I could not take a life. JoJo's also with a B. So overwhelmingly, people say they could not sacrifice somebody to save a group of others. Very interesting there. Our next ethical dilemma is probably one of the most scary on our list this evening, and unfortunately more common than one would like to admit in the dirty politics that goes on in our country and the rest, of course.
A judge's dilemma. You are the judge at a trial of a bank robber who is in fact innocent, and you know it for sure. But at the moment, the enemies of the accused have kidnapped your 6-year-old daughter and are demanding that you convict the robber in return for her freedom.
Really quick, sorry, I almost forgot the mute button there. JoJo's throws in an alternate answer, says I would sacrifice myself. Now, there's another question. Would you sacrifice yourself for the greater good? In that example, it was sacrificing another person, but as Raider pointed out, unless it's you really couldn't make that choice. So would you sacrifice yourself? That's another interesting moral dilemma. Let's hear about this one. This one here, honestly, is really the scariest to me.
You have no idea where they're keeping her, and the police can't figure it out as well. You're a nervous wreck and can't help but think that the kidnappers will or already are abusing your child. Would you convict the innocent man to save your daughter? A. I would never convict an innocent person. I'd try to find another way to save my child. B. In a heartbeat. It's twice as difficult when a child, especially your own, is involved. Which alternative is your heart telling you to pick?
The game changes, of course, when you put a child into the mix, especially if it's your child that is under threat, right? So what would you do? Would you sacrifice the innocent man to save your child, or would you sacrifice the child to save the innocent man? What would be your answer? And of course, there is no right or wrong answer. This is solely based on your personal moral choice. I would not like to be a person in this sort of situation. This is one of the scariest situations that could probably ever exist. And unfortunately, like I said, one of the situations that probably exist more often than we would like to admit. Why some of these Congress people perhaps may be doing things that are unquestionably immoral, unethical, and absolutely wrong, right?
Your best friend's wedding. You've been invited to your best friend's big day. 2 hours before the ceremony is supposed to start, you notice your friend's future spouse sneaking out of some storage room with another guest.
While that one has a chance to sink in, JoJo says B, convict him and then pardon him after getting the child back. I like that answer. Sandy B says a mama bear always saves her babies. It's definitely a moral dilemma that I don't know what I would be able to do. I have children, I have grandchildren, and I know that I would sacrifice everything in the world for both my children and my grandchildren. So, and I know everyone listening to my voice feels exactly the same. At least I would like to think so, right? Morally speaking, right? But on a serious note, when you find yourself in a dilemma like this, it's one of those things that you really don't know if there is a right or wrong answer, right? When it comes to your children especially, the whole game changes. But in our scenario here that we're listening to now, getting into, we've been noticing that the bride is possibly cheating.
They both look thoroughly disheveled, and you realize that they're having an affair. And here comes the dilemma. If you tell your friend what you found out, their perfect day will be completely ruined. At the same time, how can you allow your friend to marry somebody who's unfaithful? What would you do in such a situation? A. I'd tell my friend about the affair, Everybody deserves to know the truth. B. I wouldn't say anything. After all, my job is to support my friend's new beginnings. Plus, I could be mistaken.
And again, would you tell the person they're being cheated on, especially on their wedding day? I mean, I would like to know, right? Or would you keep it a secret and let things play out naturally between the two of them? I don't know. I do know, actually. In this case, I definitely would tell the truth, and it goes back to Nuremberg in this same type thing. How much truth is necessary, right? For instance, I was just following orders is not a valid means of getting out of something, right? Ethically, it's wrong, but I was just following orders. The truth is, you knew it was wrong. Would you rather know the truth? And we've got a lot of people waking up now to truths in the world that are, what's the word I'm looking for? Scary, to say the least, but they're still truths. Do we have an obligation as truthers, a moral dilemma we all face as truthers, to scream it from the top of our lungs to every person and demand that they hear what we have to say? Or do we keep it to ourselves and just hope that eventually the truth finds them? This is definitely something that is we all, like I said, deal with more often than not, whether it be the Mandela effect, whether it be truths about things going on in the world around us, or things that have went on by those that were supposed to be leading us, right? When these truths come out, is it our duty, our obligation to make sure that these truths get extended to the masses, especially us here on radio? Or do we have an obligation at all, and should we just leave it to ourselves and hope that they find out? Well, again, back in Nuremberg, the reason I mentioned that a moment ago is there were people that were punished for not doing their part to try to stop what had happened. So a lack of action is still an action. Keep that in mind. When you're debating these ethical decisions, well, if I do this or I do that, but a lack of an action is still an action. Any way you cut it, folks, when it comes down to it, you have to be your own moral compass, and you have to decide what is ethically right and wrong for you. And all you can do is, with each situation, look at the evidence, apply a little common sense, and
you be the judge, yeah?
That's right, boys. We got to close it out. That's right, that's it for this episode of the DarkWolf's Den Radio Show for Thursday, February the 17th, 2022. So whether you're on the edge of a reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the den may be closing for the weekend, but don't you worry, now that we've kicked the weekend off right, the weekend fun has only just begun. Make sure you come back to the Rippin' Rabbit Hole YouTube channel or Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network at the rippinrabbithole.com. as AJ the Rippin' Rabbit returns to the airwaves tomorrow night with an all-new episode of the Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show. That's right, he is going to be speaking tomorrow, Friday, February the 18th, 2022, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, on the topic of Joshua Glover. This is an incredible story from the 1800s, a story that has subsequently been buried in the history books, but a story that is absolutely vital to Rippin' in freedom itself, honestly. Then on Saturday, February the 19th, 2022, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, AJ returns to the airwaves with an episode about angel numbers. Now, I know you guys have experienced this at least once, where every time you look at the clock it happens to be 11:11, or you look all around you and that number just keeps popping up, or 1234 is one that I get a lot, and I know a lot of people get the 444. You guys know what I mean, these synchronistic numbers. These are called angel numbers, and AJ will be discussing the importance of these on Saturday, February 19th, 2022, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. That's right. Then on Sunday, February 20th, 2022, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, AJ comes back to round the weekend out right with you as he discusses the topic of heaven and the lead singer of Warrant, Janie Lane. A very deep rabbit hole indeed, and one that you definitely do not want to miss. And that is going to round the weekend out right here at Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network, the rippinrabbithole.com. That is RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. Over there, you're going to find a plethora of fun. First, you're going to sign up for your backstage pass. This is going to give you access to the rest of the site absolutely free, always will be and always has been. You're going to be able to check out all the incredible news stories over there, as well as the groups section. Maybe you can find your tribe over in the groups section over there, or you can also drop down the rabbit hole. That is our privatized social media network where we do not shadow ban. We believe in freedom and dropping information freely to help our fellow rabbits. Come on over. We don't censor, we don't shadow ban, we don't do any of those dirty tricks that the main evil sites like Facebook and the rest do, and we do not save your information. So come on over. We'd love to have you. Also, folks, just a quick note. I do believe I mentioned this earlier, but just in case, I want to make sure that I mentioned that from Monday on, after the end of this weekend, we will be doing a major site overhaul. This will take about a week or so to finish up. We are going to increase the interactivity and a lot of the fun available on the rippinrabbithole.com, make it much more enjoyable to hang out on, of course, as if it isn't already. But we will be letting you know when that is over. So if you log on and start having login issues, or if you're finding the site looking different, don't worry, we haven't been hacked. We are overhauling it. I just wanted to make sure I put that out there. AJ will give more information as the week goes on, or weekend goes on. But that is all we have time for tonight, folks. So on behalf of AJ the Rippin' Rabbit, Chick Mandela Effect, Michael Musko, Walt House, everyone involved with Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network, as well as Tom Baillies for this incredibly funky music. You gotta love the jam, folks. That's right. Anyway, on behalf of all these people, my name is Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. You're listening to the Darkwolf's Den Radio Show Freedom Flame series, exclusively on Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network, the rippinrabbithole.com. Remember, until next time we meet, stay awake, but dare to dream. That's right. Good night, everybody. Let's go, Brandon. How? Yeah. That's right. Bye, everybody. Honk, honk. Let's go, Brandon. FJB. F Turdo, too, you see.
Unlocked and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's one's ever, no one's ever.
Let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon. That's right. Let's go, Brandon. Let me see it in the chat. Roll it up. Roll it up. Let me see it, y'all.
Oh, what a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner is it in her?
Let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon. We just want to be free. Let's go, Brandon. FJB.
What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays.
Honk, 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 honk. Let's go, Brandon. FJB. Shout out to Canadian Trucker Convoy, just trying to keep us all free.
What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis.
Let go, Brandon. TTT.
What a sinner is it in her?
FJB and FYT. Let's go. Don't worry about it. Let's go, Brandon. Honk, honk, honk.
I made 2 new ones. I made
Because of the truckers in Canada standing up for freedom. Honk, honk, honk. That's right.
Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark
Yeah, we're live,
delusion? Is
They
this
can hear everything we're saying.
or just illusion?
Let's go, Brandon. That's right. Let's go, Brandon.
Lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon. We just want to be free. Let's go, Brandon. FJB. Let's go, Brandon. FYT. Brandon lives in a wonderland of delusion, don't you see? Can't see the convoys of trucker coming for him. Making sure we're all free. Fighting the good fight. On behalf of the people of the world, you see. We stand with everyone that stands with freedom. May the freedom flame long burn. Honk, honk, honk. That's right, boy. Say it again.
honk, honk, honk.
Honk, honk, honk indeed. Good night, everybody. Let's go, Brandon. That's right. Let's go, Brandon. Honk, honk, honk. Say it one more time.
Let's go, Brandon. Honk, honk, honk.
Bye, everybody.
Good night. The end. The end of your life.